Hello there YouTube land, and I'll warn you before this video begins, I'm going to go very technical and esoteric on your ass. So if you don't have the time, the patience or the intelligence to watch this video, then don't. For the rest of you, I hope you'll find my video enjoyable, informative, and above all, infallible. So I'm going to be discussing the metaphysics of perception. There's a particular thesis that I want to put forward, and indeed I am putting forward in this essay that I'm writing. Most of my criticisms and comments about philosophy thus far have merely been discussing the virtues and vices of particular viewpoints and theories and whatever. But recently I was discussing virtues and vices of a particular theory in perception, and I reconstructed the argument to show why any reconstruction would fail, but I've not been able to fault this reconstruction, so I'm advocating this position now. So let's begin. When we talk about the metaphysics of perception, we talk about the relation of perception to the external world. We talk about what relation subjects bear to the external world and their knowledge of it. One approach that I think I've briefly discussed in a few videos before is a broad assumption called naive realism. Now, well, I know a lot of you might be cringing the fact that I mentioned realism because it's not a popular YouTube thing at the moment, but it has to be said that most of the opponents of realism on YouTube attack a 300-year conception of realism. The thesis that I'm going to be defending is very modest, and prima facie it just seems right. It's an assumption that I'm going to make, and I'm going to stick by this assumption. So the assumption is simply the following, again very modest. At least some of our sensory experiences are of an experience-independent reality. That is, some of our experiential episodes are partly constituted by mind-independent objects. That's not to say that perception doesn't depend on objects or anything crazy like that. Just, for example, when I see this glass, my experiential state is dependent upon there being an external glass there. That's not too controversial, but that's the general thesis I'm going to be holding. Now, there are many reasons why I'd want to hold this position. Firstly, it makes my ontology a little bit nicer, and it has a parallel epistemology. So any solution in either the epistemology of naive realism or the metaphysics of naive realism can be used interchangeably. The first argument that I'm going to use to support my naive realism is an argument from transparency. That is, when I introspect, I do not become aware of any intrinsic non-relational features of either the objects of my experience or my experience itself. There are no, when I reflect, I cannot see the mental paint. I am only aware of a particular external object out there in the world. That's all I can ever become aware of. Of course, the argument from transparency can also be, although I agree with the argument of transparency, there's another way that we could introspect. I'll bring back the glass again. I could introspect on this glass, and I could have the thought, what would it be like if the experience that I'm having now consisted of no external referent, the glass itself? I could say that in the hallucinatory case, as separate from the veridical case, there would be something that these two cases have in common. The what it's like, the purported to refer to-ness of the object. I can say that my experience of this glass has a certain qualitative feature of it, which is it's purporting to refer to this glass. So that's true in both of those cases, and this actually argues against the other position, which also accepts the argument from transparency, which is the representationalists, a position which I used to hold myself. Anyway, so we have the purported to refer to-ness, we have phenomenological arguments, and we also have the explanatory arguments of naive realism is more explanatorily descriptive. It can describe more of the aspects of our ontology and epistemology if we assume it as a metaphysic. So I'm happy to roll with it so far. However, naive realism, if held, is incompatible with simultaneously holding two other theses. One is experiential naturalism, which is the experience is part of the causal order of the world, and the other is common kind theory, which is the hallucinations and veridical experiences constitute the same kind of thing. They are when I hallucinate and when I have a real experience, they're the same kind of thing. I can't hold both experiential naturalism and common kind assumption. I didn't want to get rid of experiential naturalism because that would lead to dualism, and dualism, there's a whole range of problems. Go watch my videos. So I'm going to drop the common kind assumption. I'm going to say that when I hallucinate, it's not the same kind of thing as when I have a real veridical experience of an object. When I hallucinate, I don't stand in a relation to any object in the external world. When I have a veridical experience, the object itself constitutes my experience. So I'm happy to accept the argument against common kind theory, which is also known as disjunctivism. There are many reasons to also hold disjunctivism. Firstly, prima facie, it seems like the initial starting position. We could say of anyone claiming to have a particular experience. This is a quote from Martin. It's certain that there are what I call perception illusion disjuncts. Statements like Macbeth perceives a dagger or is having an illusion. Or, as far as I can tell, it seems a genuine possibility that I could have been in a situation which I was not perceiving my environment for how it actually was, but in which I could not be able to tell apart from this, my actual situation. So it seems like the disjunct will have the good case of experience where I'm in relation to an object, and the bad case where I'm not. That actually seems like a good starting position, and it seems the burden of truth is on the common kind theorist. So another argument to support disjunctivism is if we take the Cardassian method of skepticism, this all could be an illusion. Granted, yes. I'm going to cash out, before I get onto this, I'm going to cash out my disjunctivism. This is a veridical experience, this is not. Now, in the hallucinatory case, my experience doesn't consist in any positive mental properties, be they property complexes, intentional objects, or any weird kind of ontologies that the common kind theorist is committed to. Instead, all I can say about those situations where I might be hallucinating is that my experience is indistinguishable through introspection of me having a veridical experience. So in the hallucinatory, if I'm having an experience, then I cannot possibly know that I'm not having a real experience. That's all a hallucination is. There are no positive mental characteristics of it. So if we go to the Cardassian argument, naive realism is actually a lot more modest than it sounds. But we'll go to the Cardassian argument and we'll say, what if everything is an illusion? Right? The person that thinks that the common kind assumption is correct and illusions and veridical real experiences are the same, thinks that even when he's in this Cardassian doubt skepticism thing, he is still aware of the positive mental properties that constitute his experience. He is still aware of the particular properties of his experience, well, his positive properties. So if he thinks he's seeing a cat, then even though it's an illusion, he's aware that his experience consists in catness, furriness, so on and so on. Whereas the naive realist says, I don't know, all I can say from this position is the negative epistemic fact that I can't possibly know that I'm not really seeing a cat. So it seems like naive realism is actually the most skeptical starting position. So there are many motivations to accept naive realism. In the next video I'm going to be critiquing it. Peace.